Yoganali, hello friends. So happy to see all of you and to be able to share my experiences in this way. We'll talk for a little bit and Pamela will work the mute for us and then we'll open it up for questions and chat and just so grateful to all of you for being here, for being aware of the need for these sharings in these times, in the dark night of the soul, we make our journey through the shadows and we come back with the gifts that we were taught by the experiences. We bring those back to our community. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of you for being in community. And yeah, we sing and dance most of the time, and that's beautiful, and that's the foundation, that's the basis of building community. But there are times like these that we go through some real darkness that impacts us on the soul level just as much as the singing and dancing and the being together. And while Helene, this hellacious hurricane, is not my worst trauma that I've experienced in this life, it is right at the top of the list with some other things that I don't want to talk about today. Really want to focus on how we prepare and we shift our ego from identity, which just falls apart with the traumas and with the dark nights. And we want to know that we can rely on our ego as awareness, as connection with the soul that holds every direct experience of many lives, not only our own personal experiences, but also the times that we are in and the times that we have been through. And what a vast resource that is. We can rely on that. I think that is the lesson of these disasters that nature is bringing to us. Nature seeks balance, and we've stepped away from balance. So she's bringing us back. We've stepped away in some big ways. So it may take some of these big ways to bring us back into balance. And we can be grateful for these lessons. It's a little easier when we're prepared, easier to be grateful now than in the moments of those times. And I also want to tell you that we can rely on our body to recognize these things. It's our body that knows this before our mind. When we woke up at 3 a.m., my little dog knew about the landslide that took a big part of this mountain to the end of our driveway. But the rain was coming through my roof into buckets so hard that I didn't hear it, I didn't feel it. I was asleep. I was grateful to be asleep, and I didn't know. But my dog knew, and he lost his shit. That's the term that we hear. That's so appropriate. And then that morning at daylight, when the 4 tornadoes and the hurricane came in, I didn't know. I had seen the forecast for 65-mile-an-hour winds, and I thought, we've done that on this mountain. It'll be all right. And so I had rolled over in the night and wasn't facing the window. And I knew the electricity was off already, and I was warm. So though I could hear the winds and I could feel the house shaking from things I didn't know what, I didn't open my eyes. I didn't roll over. And I'm so glad that I didn't know, because I would have been terrified if I had seen those 100-year-old trees falling all around my house. And even when I did open my eyes and the wind settled a bit and looked, it it was just questions. It was, what am I seeing? Where are the trees? And it was a while before I looked down at the ground and saw them lying there, and a little bit longer before I went outside and saw that they had just missed my house, my car. It was only by help from the spirit world that this was possible. When you see it, when people have come here, even still, the people that come here for the first time just have tears. They can't imagine how this could happen on this sacred mountain, how these ancient trees could be lying all over the ground, how I could still not even be able to walk on the ground because there are so many trees down from the winds and the landslides and the boulders that have impacted this mountain. It's totally different. And even the people that are doing rescue efforts that were able to walk in after 4 days, they couldn't even walk in for 4 days to see if we were okay. We had a couple of neighbors, guys who could walk through it at that time. On the first day, I saw my two closest neighbors. Nobody else could walk because the road had been taken out by the landslides, and the trees were blocking everything, and there were just a few people that could go to their closest neighbors and ask, what do you need? What can we do? But there was this feeling, there was this deep feeling of, hey, look, I'm still alive. And I think a lot of my neighbors are still alive. And that's kind of a euphoric thing that the psyche does. It's a true, deep celebration from the soul. And that's when I took my drum. Of course, the first thing I did, I repaired my medicine pouch, and I put my plant medicine in this pouch, and I put it around my neck because I knew I was going to need help, and I was going to need to honor those trees that were on the ground. And the first thing my little dog did when we went outside was just sit down and whimper and grieve with the trees. We're now lying on the ground and still lying on the ground. And there were trees hanging over the house that we were concerned about. And there were still winds. And the only thing we could ask was, what am I seeing? What is this? What am I seeing? But in the second day, I took my drum and I had journeyed for the next dance. That Yelcha, my sweet 78-year-old friend in the UK, had asked for a dance for replenishing before the hurricane. And so I had done my journey for that dance just before this happened. And that's always the first thing I do, is journey to my spirit helpers and invite them to come in and participate. And I never know what that's going to look like. But I knew they were here and I could see. And I think everybody who comes here can see and feel that help, and that it is unique. And even the people that were working many of the rescue areas said that this is one of the worst that they've seen. And the men that just choke up and let their tears roll was beautiful. It's really beautiful now that I've survived it. But I did that recording with the drumming for the dance that we're going to do this Tuesday for replenishing. And I played my gong, which is a big sound healing energy shift. And I recorded both and I put them together so you'll get to hear and feel that energy. And it was It was as quiet as I've ever experienced, you know, in the whole world. There was nothing going on. It was before the rescue people walked in, and there was no sound other than the drum and the gong in that recording. And it's a beautiful dance, and I'm grateful to Yalta for asking for that dance at just the right time. And of course, the evening before, as the rain was coming through my roof, we danced with the elements, the water, the earth, the air, and the fire, with people all over the world, and many of you were there and danced with us and the four elements that night as that storm was rolling in and that rain was creating the floods that took so many lives, hundreds of lives, and over 500 bodies still missing. They're still looking for those bodies, and so much devastation that we had no idea what was going on around us. But after I, you know, created drumming, and another interesting thing, when I could finally get to my gongs outside, they were off. They were hanging there, they were okay, but the mother tree, the huge white oak, was on the ground, uprooted, with a huge gaping hole in the earth, right beside the gongs outside, and they didn't sound right. And I didn't see anything physically wrong, but I just played them anyway. And then the next time I played them, they were perfect. They were right back in alignment, and I wonder if the spirits came back into those gongs and into the drums like I've experienced so many times, and into the plants and into everything really. But today, in addition to the ways of healing our spirits and our soul connections and the critical things that we do first, I want to give you all the gifts that I came back with, or that I'm coming back with. I'm still coming through the stages of trauma, still feeling that deep depression. The sighs are not as deep once we got the trees that were hanging over the house and a few things restored, the furnace, the hot water, the electricity after more than 2 weeks. It got a little easier, and it does. It's a slow process, but it does get easier. We gotta just remember that all along the way, all through these dark journeys that we're gifted with by nature. So the first thing I want to focus on is the water as we go through the elements. I want to encourage you to take notes and ask questions and bring these things into your daily life so that they're not a scramble and an unknown, along with all the unknowns that we face in these traumas, that they are familiar, and you know what's going to happen with this little bottle of water and vinegar. Simple as it gets. I had stored up water from every bottle of Pellegrino, which is the cleanest bottle I get, glass bottles. And I had used this, which I just, you don't have water to wash your hands. I thought I was all set because I've got a well, a 30-gallon tank that the water comes into from the well, and I've got the 50-gallon hot water heater, but you just get a trickle. And when that pump is not pumping the water into the system, you've got enough pressure to give you a trickle for probably less than 10 or 12 gallons. That's all I got out of the faucet. And I could have attached a hose to the hot water tank, but I didn't have all that in place. So I washed my hands, and it is critical because bacteria levels come up, and there's been an increase in waterborne bacteria with this storm. So I had already learned to spray my hands. I'll show you how to do it. There's a little mist and there's a little mist, and I just rub them together. Just needs one. Just rub them together, and if they're not too dirty, I'll use this little linen napkin. But if they are, like I've been handling the dog's food or something, I'll get one of these natural as I can get it paper towels, and I would let it dry and use it 2 or 3 times with the dirtiest stuff, and then wipe the counters and wipe the sink with it, and bring out 1 bottle a day to drink and to work with. And I was able to get by on about 1 liter of water a day. And I was also had a case of this organic pineapple juice. I could drink half one day, and without the refrigerator, I could drink the other half the next day. And that felt really good. That was more energy than I was getting, from anything. The fruit. We evolved on fruit and vitamin C, and that was tremendously helpful. And of course, I had the groceries that I had, but it was 2 weeks without getting any groceries. And I stored some things up, the squash. It was the time of the harvest. It was harvest time, so I had some squash and had my propane stove that I could cook on. But even with all this water, I would spray my face and then wipe it with this cloth. That's how I wash my face, my eyes in the morning. And amazing what you can brush your teeth with. Enough for the dog, and then as it started to get low and I started to just feel miserable, after the first week, I made my way down to the stream where I knew there was a spring, but the water had flooded and the spring was underwater. So I couldn't get to my spring water, but I could get in that little stream enough to get myself clean. And believe me, that made a huge difference in the way I felt after a week. Hardly any contact. But things that I'll share on getting in the stream is save your knee pads or your gardening little mats, so you can get down in the rocks, so you can really get yourself in the low water. And the thing that I liked the most was a piece of fleece. I had some really clear, just plain fleece that I'd had for a long time, and I cut a little washcloth out of that because it kind of turns into a cross between a sponge and a cloth. And cotton holds everything. It holds the bacteria and just grows with the mold and the bacteria. But the fleece rinses it out, and it acts like, a sponge a little bit and a washcloth a little bit, and you can wring it really well, and then it's a towel. So you can do all those things with just a little tiny piece of fleece and just keep rinsing it in the stream as the water flows or in whatever you've got. The first thing that a lot of people faced was flushing the toilet. And I was lucky to have a rainwater catchment cube just outside that had caught all that rainwater, and the buckets that I keep for lodge ceremony, and the buckets that make it easy to carry that inside. And we didn't have rain for way over a month. We barely had enough rain already in 2 months. But I was able to dip that rain water cube and bring it into the house and flush the toilet. And I had a friend who didn't have that, and he told me about using a case of Fresca to flush his toilet and then leaving town. A lot of people were leaving town, but a lot of good people were coming in to help us who couldn't leave town. There were about 6 of us who toughed it out in this cove out of about 30 people, and some of them are not back yet. And some, I wonder if they're coming back. A lot of people had to move, their jobs went away and all that, but it felt good to be able to get clean, to know that I had enough water, but nobody knew how long it was going to be. The emergency radio stations just kept saying it's going to be a long time. And they were right, because the residents of the city who had city water just now got their water back. It was almost 2 months because the what is truly a watershed, which is a municipality creation to provide water to people, unlike our river basin that I insist on using our traditional terms of river basin because it honors the river, the name of the river, and the characteristics of the land. And we are indigenous people. We are people of the land. And going back to the land is our only choice in times like this. So that's again, why I want to help you make these preparations and encourage you to do this on a daily basis so that you are connected to the land in this way and you're familiar with these things. Everything is new and foreign and shocking, and all the familiarity you can hang on to is so helpful for the psyche when we're in trauma situations like this. So water was the first and the biggest and the last to come through. So focus on your water. Go ahead and find a place that you can access that's a safe place. And just every time you empty a jar, and some people had to leave their home. So they needed a jar with a tight lid, and these pineapple jars or juice jars, or, you got to wash them really well or they won't store. That's why I use the Pellegrino jars because they were so clean and they didn't have soap residues that I react to. And they don't have a tight lid though. So they were great here in the house. But if I'd had to get in the car to get away and go somewhere, I would have had to take these bottles that are really clean. And when I say wash them, I don't mean with soap because you're going to feel that when you get back to the land and away from using so much of that. You're going to feel that difference. Wash them with salt. Sea salt is a natural antibacterial. So get used to using the sea salt. I will caution, I used a little too much sea salt in my sink and it broke down some of the metal that was holding the drain. So baking soda I've used for decades and didn't have any problems with that, but the sea salt is really strong. And the combination of sea salt and vinegar, if you've got wounds or you've got really, really difficult cleaning tasks, can't beat the sea salt and the vinegar. Because the vinegar's already been through everything. It's been through every bacteria in the air. And that's why it's so good to put on a wound and to do anything with, really. I wash my hair in vinegar. I wash my clothes in vinegar. You can do any of that in the vinegar. In the stream, it doesn't hurt the stream. It doesn't hurt the animals. So get familiar with it. Call in your friends, build your community of plant medicine support right along with your people community support. And so the next thing I had to face as I ran out of food and the refrigerator wasn't working was just, keeping the food, keeping the energy up. I did lose probably 10 or 15 pounds, but I didn't go hungry. I was able to just pace myself with what I had. And I found that the French pot of what they call soup du jour, which is soup of the day in a pot that's actually it's inherited. They never wash the pot, and the soup is of the day because it's just what's been in there recently and what's in there today, and it'll be different tomorrow because you go out. I would go out every morning and add a plant to my Cherokee tradition of one pot. We put everything in the pot and we call everything a pot herb. And so we have things on the mountain that we can pick every day and add to that. And it really is nourishing. You can feel that energy going into the pot, the heartleaf violets, the plantain, the birch leaves in the spring, the sassafras leaves, they'll thicken a stew for you. The black birch leaves, although you don't want to give those to the dog, and I do share my soups with the dog, so I don't use that as much because it's the xylitol that people, use as a sweetener. And it's our cleansing medicine, but it's not good for the dogs. So you got to be kind of careful. Got to know your plants, get used to them now, and use your friends, call on your friends, know what you're familiar with from your direct experiences. But also the trees brought down the usnea, which is a really amazing, broad spectrum. And it's a parasite that grows on the trees. It's also called old man's beard. And I don't know if Pamela has it close by, but she has this sweet little old man with the beard that her family gave her because she started using the usnea. Yeah, can you show us his beard, Pamela, up close so we can see the usnea close up in your camera? This is on every tree, just about everywhere. And it does look like an old man's beard. And she's got this beautiful little old man that they made for her because she has gotten into her relationship with the usnea and brought her family along to get familiar with the usnea. This is sometimes called nature's doxycycline because after a tick bite, there's nothing like it. You can do a 23 or 28-day round of doxycycline and throw your immune system out of whack with the antibiotics, or you can just really hit this usnea hard and it will take care of you. And the way that we did diagnosis, we think that allopathic medicine is so necessary for diagnosis. When this usnea plant has come to me in very noticeable amounts, like all these trees around on the ground right now, it said, you're going to need this. You better pay attention. And the last Lawampe ceremony, which is the ceremony of sevens, I did about 7 of them that pulled me out of the jaws of death in 2004. And on the way to the last one, I pulled over beside the road and there was this huge pile of usnea and I was like, okay, gather it. We're going to need it. And I got strep throat. Only time I've ever had strep throat from that gathering of people. And then a friend who was coming into lodge ceremony here had a car accident and she got x-rays in her chest and they found that she had lung cancer that needed to be operated on immediately. And it scared the daylights out of her. This was the allopathic diagnosis. And she came here. She came here. We just walked around on the mountain and we listened for the plants to talk to us. And this is the plant that spoke to us, this usnea. And I said, okay, well, this is your medicine. You'll see it everywhere. And we sang our songs, we did our ceremonies to help her and connect with her ancestors who've done their work. And when she got home, she sent me a picture, and right beside where she parked her car was this tree limb, just piles and piles of usnea. And it had been there for her. So when the plants come to you like that, that's your diagnosis. And you may not know you need it, but it's telling you, hey, we're here to help you. We're here for you. So pay attention when that happens, It really is the connection to all life around us. And when we go there with our ego as awareness, which is what these disasters teach us, this level of awareness with all life around us, then that is a huge shift from our ego as identity. Now, you hear all these bypassing woo-woo things say, get rid of ego. Well, ego keeps us alive, but ego as identity doesn't keep us alive. It keeps us caught in consumerism and surface level outer substance things. It's actually ego as awareness. And when we're in these disasters, we don't think about the car we drive, the clothes we wear, the music we listen to, the purse, the whatever identity, the commercials we see on TV. We don't think about all that. We think about if there's a hand in the rubble and we can reach down and help preserve life in any way, that's ego as awareness. And that's what nature teaches us. when she takes us through these dark nights of the soul, these dark, dark times where we have to build this awareness and bring these gifts back into our community. And I don't call it the hero's journey like Joseph Campbell does, because that word, that hero, is based on, you know, identity. That's the identity that I'm talking to. Hey, look, I'm a hero. We see so much of that in our culture at this time, instead of, hey, look, there's a hand, I can preserve life, which is ego as awareness. So it's just the next right thing. It's our definition of getting through the day. What can I do right now? And I've been living that way for about 20 years, but it gets bigger when we have these natural disasters. And that's the kind of ego state that we shift into with natural disasters. And it's a gift. It is truly a gift. And we realize the more of these we go through, how critical it is. And that's why we bring the gift that we learn back into community and share in this way. And so we move from the water to the food, okay? In addition to the soup du jour and the pot that I kept going the whole time, didn't have to wash it, just had to add food. And I didn't eat it for more than 2 days. You know, I was careful. I would make what I could eat in 2 days, and then it would be pretty low levels in the pot, and I would put whatever I had in there to start a new pot, a new stew, a new soup. A lot of that was lentils. It didn't take a lot to wash lentils. It was more than a week. It was probably 10 days before I had to hit the canned beans and the things, that are processed. That was a shift in energy. You feel the difference when you're at this level of survival. And another thing that was easy and helpful that I was glad to have was the nut butters, the almond butter. And yeah, I didn't have my oven to make bread, but I had dates, these deglet dates. I had a jar of dates, and this is like 2,000 calories. So almond butter on dates is not only delicious and encouraging and a little treat in times like this, but it's also, some basic strength and nourishment. And I don't encourage peanut butter because that grows fungus. So get used to kind of balancing out your gallbladder and the fat levels that feel good with these things. And so I created some recipes during the midst of all this out of necessity. I also had a, a stovetop cobbler that I had been trying for years to master. And I guess I just didn't have the motivation, because I managed to make a stovetop cobbler with a jar of applesauce, with the dried mulberries that are my dog's favorite treat. You get to the bottom of the bag, and there's all these single little mulberry pieces. So I soaked them in a little bit of water, and I make a real simple cobbler where you put the fruit of whatever you've got in there, and a lot of water, or as much water as you've got. And then I use the buckwheat flour with a little bit of sesame oil, which is the only processed oil I use. And of course, the baking soda and the salt and coconut sugar. Or I didn't use the coconut sugar at that time. I put the honey on top. The honey has a lot more nutrition. You can actually survive on honey for more than a day. A teaspoon of honey a day keeps us alive. Pumpkin is another one that keeps us alive. If we had to just be eating one food, pumpkin would do it. So I had some cans of pumpkin, some cans of beans, and I had some rice, but that takes a lot of water, so you don't use that as much. You mostly, use the greens, and greens can be dried too. We dry the green bean, That has to soak a long time in water. So you want to think about all this. You want to think about what you like, what really feeds your spirit as well as your body. And what if you had to survive for 2 weeks in this way? So get used to trying these things. I made cobbler with things I had never tried before because that's what I had. And I'm happy to go to the recipe stage if we ever get there. It's not like you write down a cup of this, a teaspoon of that. It's you have enough alkali, whether it's, baking soda or whatever, an acid to put together and get things to rise. And you turn the pot on the stove instead of stirring a cobbler. If you stir, you got dumplings. That's pretty good too. You got the choice. I made a chocolate pudding, a ginger pudding with arrowroot. That was a really good thing to have on hand. And it's our medicine for the poisonous arrows. So you know how good that is. And if there's, any favorites that you really like and you really enjoy, then that's what you want to get used to using. You want to focus on these things that lift your spirits in these times. So keep your pot of soup going, keep your cobbler or your dumplings, keep your bread, your carbs, your balance, your proteins. Feel your body, because your body is your best friend in these times. It's going to tell you things that nothing else can, because it's the one that's really invested in staying alive. It's the first one to show up on life-sustaining awareness level. And that's where the healing comes in too. So we've got the water, we've got the food, we've got the psyche participating in all this process, and then we've got electricity. Boy, that's a tricky one. You know, forget the petroleum candles. There's a little device that's kind of handy that is called electrical arcing. I don't know if you can see it. I'll put it up here by my camera. See how it sparks? It springs up that spark. It's really good to burn your plant medicine with in the mornings. Much better than the candles. Candles are going to give you that petroleum choking feeling, and the plant medicine is there to help you. So you can burn the chaga. If you don't have propane like I did, you can get a chaga ember going. You want to learn to use that because it doesn't go out, and you need a pot to put it in, a metal pot, a safe place. You want to know that fire. You want to know that ember. It's our original pipe ember that we kept the pipe going and passed the pipe chanupa, kept our pipe lit, and it's good medicine. It pulls the metals out of our body and helps us get used to, clearing our body, really taking care of ourselves on a daily basis with the plant medicine that grows around us. So I highly recommend chaga ember instead of the candles. Move away the candles and the petrol products quick as you can. And if you can get one of those, what they call a chafing dish, you can put the chaga in there and you can cook with that. It's a little harder, it takes a little longer. You probably spend most of the day cooking if you don't have the propane burner that I was so happy to have. But your day becomes food, water. And when I didn't know what to do with myself, I mean, there's no substitute for electricity. Yeah, you can get the generators. I finally got one. But it's pain. It wasn't all that helpful, honestly. It was warm, if it had been cold, I guess that would have been different. When the electricity came back on, they didn't check my meter well, and the neutral wire was loose, so it blew out all my high voltage appliances. Had to get a new furnace, a new hot water heater, everything after the electricity came back on. So you want to be really careful. One thing that saved my refrigerator and my space heater was having a strip that had some protection, not just an an electric strip that has electricity, but it also has some something in there that is a buffer. It's a little bit of protection, and I'm so glad that saved my refrigerator and my space heater. And that thing just melted down and created this horrible, chemicals stuff in the air that I couldn't breathe, and I had to get it out of my house. All these things you don't think about to experience them, but when you smell that stuff, get it out of your house. Don't breathe it. Don't just sit there and breathe it. Take care of your body. It'll take care of you. There's not much in the lines of electricity. And what do you do with yourself? You're not going to have electrical things. So just, what do you do with yourself? The first thing I started doing was singing my songs. And that's why we have a song sharing, once a month where we learn the words to these songs. I couldn't look them up on my phone because I was realizing how precious that charge, and that cell signal was coming and going for a little while, and then it was gone. Those towers were down. They weren't working, and I didn't know what to do with myself for the entire day when I wasn't looking for food and water and plants, and couldn't, you know, couldn't be that comfortable outside because limbs were still falling out of trees. And usually I'm in the forest most of the day, and that's my sanctuary. That's my solace, my place of repairing and healing. And now I still can't walk, and there's nothing but dueling chainsaws and chippers, and these huge dump trucks bringing in rocks for the landslides and trying to put the road back in place and all these things. So I'm still singing my songs and playing my drum and gong. And I was blessed with beauty. A lot of what heals the wounds of disaster is beauty, just seeing the beauty. And my view opened up. I'd never been able to see the river from the mountain. I'm up here 3,000 feet, halfway up the 6,000-foot mountain. I knew the river was down there. I could hear the train along the river, and I could tell. I could watch the fog lift, but after all the trees fell, I could see the mist on the river. And I learned, from one battery that held out, I learned that the mist was clearing, and it was huge because the river was so flooded. And fortunately, I didn't know how many lives it had taken, how many bodies were in that river, how many propane, gasoline tanks were in that river at that time. And I could just watch the mist, and I knew that it cleared by about 10 in the morning. So I learned where the sun was then, and that it would come back in the evening around 5 or 6. And so I knew to get ready for dark, get myself prepared, and a lot of meditation. I don't think I've ever done so much meditation. And my meditation is not sit with your mind and think with the monkey mind, think about this, think about that. My Zen teaching and meditation is any time that I am just in the present moment. We look at a spot on the wall, and anytime that we're just sitting on a cushion or a chair or in a comfortable place, looking at the spot on the wall, we are present. And that's this awareness that I'm referring to. And we know that the thoughts will come and they'll take us back into the past, or they'll take us to a solution in the future, or an opinion about something. And that's when the psyche wobbles. And we want to come back to the present moment. Every moment that we are just sitting comfortably with the spine straight, looking at a spot on the wall and being present with the quiet mind, that's my Soto Zen meditation that helped so much during this time. Just being present. And it's called refuge in the present moment, because in that present moment, I was just sitting there breathing, noticing my breath and noticing that I was present. I wasn't thinking about the tree leaning over my house that might fall. I wasn't thinking about the devastation all around me from the past, or how was I going to get it clear in the future. I still don't know. But I was taking refuge in that present moment and really experiencing that big sigh of relief, that true feeling of refuge in the present moment. So music increases oxygen levels, singing, yoga was wonderful, dancing. When I had that energy, that creative euphoria of, hey, look, I'm still alive. I can make this drumming and gong music on my little Tascam recorder and share it for the next dance, which I'm so happy to do on Tuesday. And hope to do with all of you. And this is how, and of course, playing with the dog. The dog taught me the importance of playing. So gather your toys. Don't wait for the disaster to find your toys. May not be able to get them then. Bring your toys around you every day and make some playtime, even if you don't have a dog to motivate you. Find something that feeds your spirit and nurtures you and really feels uplifting, because it's necessary. It's just as much a necessity as any of this. And what I missed the most was being able to connect with my community like this. Fortunately, the first rescue people that I saw on the fourth day was from Reach Out Worldwide. I finally saw a couple of guys walking over the trees and on the trees with these black sweatshirts that said ROWW. And I thought, row? Are they, they're not rowing up on the mountain. What is this? I've never heard of Reach Out Worldwide. But they're the first people to walk into this cove and see if we were all still here. And it was so nice to see them. And they didn't bring anything. They didn't do anything except say, is there somebody you need to send a message to? We can go back down the mountain and reach out on the emergency waves, and we have people who are ready to reach out in whatever way you tell us to let people know you're okay. That was the very first people doing the very first thing we needed. And that contact with community was so valuable, just to know. Because, day 2 and 3, I was thinking, will anybody even know? Will anybody even miss me? Will anybody realize that I can't do anything or anything about what might be going on here? I didn't know. So, I knew, well, who knows my Facebook groups? Who shows up in community? And that's what it comes down to, showing up. A lot of you just show up, and that's what builds community. And so I could, get to my phone enough to get Sylvia's number. Couldn't get Pamela because I didn't know if they could reach out to another country, but I knew that Sylvia would get it on Facebook one way or another. And so I was able to give them Sylvia's number and let Facebook know that I was here. That's about it. But it was so good to be able to do that. And when I could finally get back online, which seemed like an eternity, I mean, the worst was no contact. It was solitary confinement. And you got to do something to feed your spirit when you're in that situation. Even if you got neighbors, they're all focused on what can we do to survive. That's not, I mean, that's a level of community, but that's not the relief and the refuge of community that is so valuable. And I've kind of felt like, I tried getting back on. Some of you saw how frustrating that was. I couldn't get a strong signal. I couldn't get there. Unfortunately, Michael DiMartino showed up with the Love Pod, which I didn't know very much about. I knew that he had one, and I didn't know how it worked or anything, but I still would not have internet if he had not shown up with this Love Pod and gotten me this tiny little thing that works through the cell phone and the satellites. And you guys may notice, since you are a community and you are here often, you may notice that my signal is better than it was on the internet I had before, which has said it would be back maybe by the end of December. But I would not have internet if Michael hadn't come through with this little love pod that works without electricity, because it's been out many times since it came back on, every time the wind blows. And it's so bad they didn't even put the poles back up. They brought in new poles and new lines, new transformers, didn't even salvage the electrical system at all. It's still lying on the ground with all these wires, and that's where my internet is covered up, you know. So you don't know if things are coming back. You just don't know. So all these things are critical to get familiar with before you need them. Can't encourage you enough to actually get these things in place before you need it, because we're all getting these lessons. This mountain had never had an experience of 4 tornadoes along with a hurricane. I mean, I've always said the hurricanes stop at the mountains, and the trees don't let the hurricanes through. And the more you people in Florida cut your trees, the closer the hurricanes come to us. And the path that it took to get here is called the open cut in Asheville. They actually cut into the mountain to open up the city so you wouldn't have to go through a tunnel about 20 years ago. And that's where these tornadoes turned, and they came up this road called Town Mountain Road. And when you hit this pass, we call it a gap. I think, in the Midwest, they call it a pass, but it's called Craven Gap off the Blue Ridge Parkway. When it hit that gap, it turned and came right down the mountain to the river. The house above me is on the top of the gap, and it had no trees standing. And Pamela's got a picture. That first video you guys saw when you came in was the trees in my yard. That I had taken that video the just before this happened in the summer, during the summer. And then Pamela got a picture she'll show you now of what it looks like looking into that gap now, so you can see the difference. And that was at night in the full moon, you know. And if you can see on the bottom, I don't know how well you can see, but they're huge trunks. This is after the forest, had been cleared. The road had been cleared. The driveway had been cleared. I think she's got a picture of the driveway and my car before it was cleared down there. That, believe it or not, that's the driveway. But see how those trees just so carefully and kindly avoided the car? And the house is, of course, right by the car. That is the help from the spirit world, the spirit of the trees, the spirit of the mountain, spirit of my ancestors and helpers. And that's what we connect to when we sing and dance and when we come into community like this. We build community and connection with all life around us. And this is the benefit we get, you know, this is the protection that does not fit cause and effect. It's not Newton's laws of physics. It's quantum physics. And that's what we do here in community as well, you know. We share these experiences with each other so that we can build our strength as community. We can remember these ways in the times that we need them. And it's so beautiful that we can reach all over the world and we don't have to just all be in disaster zones together, because that's where we are now. In land-based community, we're all in disaster together. And it's so good to be able to reach out to those of you who are not in this, you know, our hearts come into sync when we gather in community. We come in and lift each other up in the many, many ways that we truly, truly connect and become community in the deepest, deepest ways of our soul and the times that we're in. And this is the way that our collective needs to be impacted. I hold the DreamWorks for the collective monthly, and the one before this hurricane showed me in my collective dream what it would be like. And I didn't recognize any of it. I didn't know what to make of it. It was a big green, something like a skyscraper that I had to navigate without floors and ceilings and walls. And there was like no dimensions, but there was this green thing, and that green. It was an odd color of green, but that was the green that I saw when I opened my eyes and looked out the windows. All the leaves coming down, all the trees, all the wind coming through, all the plants. Was an uncommon shade of green that was in my dream. And so we do that work so that we can encourage the collective, that we can be an impact on the soul level, the world's soul. And the world trees, they connect our protection from the lower realms to our teachers in the higher realms, and we learn to ask for kind, gentle lessons. Even though this is a tragedy and a disaster, it is a kind, gentle lesson for me, and I am so grateful to all life around me for making it that, and to all of you for being in community and allowing me to make this cycle of the dark night of the soul and bring these survival things, these ways that my ancestors showed me when we couldn't talk about them. And now I can show you and share with you in community. This is the gift. The Opus is called. We bring what we learn back to our community. And this is the importance of having community and really having the connections that are deep in our community. And I know you all feel the difference because you're here, and because you keep showing up, singing and dancing in the good times, and talking like this through the difficulties. So I want to open up for questions. I know you have to know enough to get yourself ready for these direct experiences, and I want to encourage. I can't encourage you enough to rely on your direct experiences. Don't take. I mean, I listen to so many opinions and preppers left me nowhere. My neighbors had this big wall of solar panels, and they were the first to go to the hotel. Didn't do them any good. They didn't have any water. They didn't, the preppers told me to get freeze-dried food. That wasn't any good. You know, they look at all these processed products that just take energy down. And I don't know. I mean, there's some things that are good to have. Like my big purpose thing is this love pod, you know, that gives me 13 hours of signal. I had people that would come and get my laptop and take it down to where the power was working and charge it, bring it back. And so then I could charge my cell phone and I'd feel a little safer, even though I didn't really have signal. I didn't know that I really didn't have cell phone, that I didn't have any way of reaching out if the tree fell on my house or whatever, you know, whatever I needed, safety or whatever. I thought I had it, but I didn't. So, how can I support you in building your direct experience of being in this kind of awareness on a daily basis? So it'll be there for you when you need it, for whatever. And hopefully you don't need it. Hopefully you won't need it. But you'll feel so much better and build that ego awareness and shift away from ego identity and consumerism. This will strengthen the ego vessel. This is the first step I do when I do my dream work with people, which I do for free because it's so necessary and it's so beneficial. I build the ego vessel by helping them know their archetypal patterns and who they truly are, so that they can call on that in this time of awareness, so that that strength, that ego vessel, is like the soup du jour pot that's inherited. You know, we do the work for our ancestors, for our descendants. This is our vessel that we pass along, this ego vessel of knowing who we are and building that foundation for awareness of our ego strength in the times that we need it. So, open for questions. We got
Yes,
another
I
25 minutes.
I actually have more stories and gratitudes than questions. The one question you mentioned, the what you used instead of um, the, the typical candles. Um, I wondered, soybean and or beeswax candles. Okay. Um,
They're still going to choke you, and they're not going to get you through that time period. The wicks are really not good. They're kind of wicked, actually, for
okay.
you to breathe, and
Yeah,
it
so
is very different.
that was one question. The story is actually the gratitude um was to Michael DiMartino and the Love Pod folks. And um that Monday, that Reach Out Worldwide was able to get through to me. I had actually spent a lot of time on the phone um, with um, North Carolina um, United Way, who had set up a um, system for people to request wellness checks. Um, and so I had filled out the wellness check request and was told that it would probably take a few days. Um, and then I got the call. Um, I don't remember his name, but when he got down off the mountain, he called me and told me that you were okay. And
Mhm.
what really surprised me was that somehow you had signal or an opportunity, or I don't know what, but Tuesday morning I got a text from you saying you were okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened, but that was a huge gratitude. And
Hmm.
the question about um the beeswax and the paraffin, Mom actually taught us about that practice of the soup pot. Um, and during the blizzard of 78, we had a soup pot going on the back of the at the back of the fire um, for the whole time that we were without power. She also taught me about plant um, plantain, um,
Yeah.
and then um, yeah, various practices like that. And
Mhm.
I'm gonna honor that today is her birthday.
Oh, beautiful.
She
Sweet.
crossed over, you know, more
Mhm.
than 20 years ago. And so
Mhm.
she would appreciate us being in circle in this way today. She does
Yeah.
appreciate it. So
Thank you.
thank you,
Yeah,
Gail,
that's
and
beautiful.
Michael, and
Mm.
the folks that reach out worldwide and all.
Yeah, oh, that's, yeah. Let me share a little more about the chaga. Here's the tiny little chunk of chaga that I would use in a chanupa pipe. Okay, it's a polypore. It's a little shelf that grows on the trees. Okay, to start your fire, you can use the polypore from the locust tree or any tree. But in the chaga, you want to use the polypore from the white birch or the black birch. The best medicine is actually the black birch. And this is a tiny little chunk of it. And I can less in this little tiny chunk will burn for probably half an hour if I'm real careful with it. Now, if you're going to cook with it, you want a bigger chunk, and you want to get familiar with this plant medicine because it is a critical one. It is one of the most critical. And you can, you can combine it with the cedar, a little cedar bark. There's a little cedar bark and a chaga. We'll start out kind of fire. This cedar bark will help a bigger chunk of chaga get going, get burning. But you want to be really careful when you're putting out the chaga because this I buried, a bigger chunk, a foot in the ground, and come back 3 days later, and there's still fire in it. So that's the benefit. This will hold your fire in the earth and move your fire from place to place if you need to move. You just got to learn to be careful with it because it'll also burn everything down. Okay, an ember is much hotter than what we think of, which is a coal from the fire. We call that an ember in our society, but this is an ember and that's a coal, and that doesn't last anywhere near as long as this. I'll cover up a lodge fire and it'll stay for 24 hours if I put a good bit of dirt on it. Those coals will hold fire, but this chaga, I can bury it a foot in the ground and it'll just hold that fire. So yeah, you definitely want to get familiar with the chaga and get away from the candles.
How you mentioned that it's in the shelf of various trees. Um,
It is a shelf. It grows as a shelf. You look at the tree and you'll see this little shelf sitting out on the tree and it's got this base that goes under it. And you can just go up and push it from the bottom a little bit and it'll come home with you.
okay.
It's nice if you offer it some tobacco, some lobelia, and you ask it if it wants to come home with you, but it's actually doing the tree a service if you remove it from the tree because it's a fungus that grows on the tree and it's beneficial to remove it. It's there to be taken, to be used, not to stay on the tree.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Sylvia. Anybody else? Michael, you had something to share in the chat. You want to talk to us a little more about that? If it's a good time for you to do that.
I just appreciated what you were saying because, we live in very transformational times, and I sense and see that a lot of people do have some level of fear about things, just, whatever it is, waking up in the morning, you know, food security, water security, safety of family members. But I had acknowledged in the chat when you had said that because I think, you know, there are a lot of these kind of emergency prepper kind of psychologies that are out there doing things on the basis of fear. And even though maybe some of that fear is relative to the potential of actual situations. But I love what you were saying because before we talked about preppers or emergency preparedness, we we go back and we look towards indigenous cultures living closer to the land, being a little more self-sustainable, and and also simplifying our lives from maybe so many of the distractions. I know we live in a challenging society here, primarily in North America, Turtle Island, just because of the culture. But um, I really appreciated what you're saying because nature does give us these opportunities to kind of unplug from the matrix and all of these things that tend to be patterns we fall into, which can really sap our energy, exhaust us. Um, so I brought that up because I think part of it is as we move forward, following what we call biomimicry or nature's intelligence is, nature is the medicine and the cure and the simplicity of that. And it's not like, we all have to radically change our lifestyle, but the idea of simplifying, being more self-sustainable and coming up with solutions or alternatives to whatever fear we might be experiencing at this time. And I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of that is community. A lot of that is, as divisive as the world might seem right now with all the politics and everything, but knowing our neighbors, knowing our environment, knowing what's there naturally to support us and help us. And I know very quickly, when I moved from California 4 years ago, I live in Crestone, which is a town of like 150 people, and it's very quiet. There's not much art and culture and things happening. So the idea of um, unplugging from the matrix of the mind, wanting to be busy and doing things, to just the fulfilled sense that comes with just kind of being and being quiet, like you were mentioning, like whether it's Zen or Buddhist or meditation or walking in nature, just having more of that and less of the fear and the distractions and the things that don't nourish us and feed us. So I just wanted to acknowledge I really appreciate what you said, not only because of the hurricane, but lemonade out of lemons. That was an opportunity to, again, to drop in maybe deeper and remember some of these things, and again our connection with ourself and the natural world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you so much for the love pod that finally got me back online with all of you. And the examples that Sylvia was mentioning, we've got this telepathy, we've got this ability to connect without the electronics. It shows up when we need it. It's not like, a circus act, and I don't think we need to go around flaunting it like that, but I've experienced so many times that there is so much more potential for humans than we are aware of. Anybody else? Any have questions or anything they want to share?
Ursula raised her hand.
Yeah, just open your mic and speak. I can't see
Yeah.
hands. You guys just talk.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Gail, because I did wonder what the reality was for you, but I did see almost within a couple of days that Sylvia had written on the Facebook, so that sort of quietened my mind a bit. And in terms of today, yeah, it's good to hear that you're confirming that, the dried fruits and nuts and so on, which most of us probably do have at home. It's really good, that's something that really works. I didn't really understand what you meant about the candles, how you could keep a lighter light, what you use there. What was it you did with the candles? What sort of candles?
I did away with the candles. I didn't
No
do
candles.
candles.
Oh,
No candles because your air is going to be compromised already when the earth is shaken like this, when things are shaken up like this. You're going to notice that it's going to be more challenging to breathe. You don't have water, you don't have food like you usually do, and you don't have air that's fresh and clear like you usually do when there are trees falling all around and
right.
storms coming in from elsewhere. So you don't want to add the petroleum of the wax, whether it's, the processes of soy or whatever. You don't take a soybean and get a candle without some chemicals. You just don't. And
Yeah.
even the beeswax, it's very hard to find beeswax, and you put a wick in there that's not a natural item. It's very processed, and it's
Yeah.
not gonna feel good when you're in the midst of this level of staying alive. So the
Yeah, I hadn't considered
chaga,
that. Yeah, I hadn't really considered that.
yeah, you don't think about it until you're right there in it. And so the chaga is going to be there for you. You can go out and in a park in the city, you can go out and see these little shelves growing on the trees.
Yep.
Just walk over, give it a little from the bottom, it'll pop right off and come home with you and learn to use it when you don't need it. Like, whether you've got a little electrical arcing thing like I have to bring in with the cedar bark, which is going to flame a little longer than the green cedar. If you've got cedar around you, you take that and you learn to use it with the chaga. It takes a while to light. You make tea from the black outer part and the gold inner parts for the ember. And this is how we made our bowls. This is how we made our canoes. We didn't take coals out of the fire. We took the polypores that grow on the trees and made the embers and burned away the wood and just scraped it out with a stone and just kept doing that. It's a slow, steady process. It's going to keep us warm, but you got to learn to use it because you can burn the house down. It's not
Yeah.
like anything you ever experienced. So build that relationship, this is really all about relationship,
And when you were talking about the love
bringing
pods,
that together with each other.
when you were talking about the love pods, what does that mean?
That's this great little device. Again, if I could probably defer to Michael, I couldn't understand what it was, but it's this tiny little thing that's smaller than my cell phone that works through my cell phone to find the satellites. The reason I could send that text out is that the towers were falling apart. They
Yeah.
were literally falling apart, and people were up there trying to keep them going, to keep the emergency networks going. And so they were working on the towers, and the tower would come and go, and it was not reliable. Sometimes it was 4G, that's what it connects with on the phone. The tablet was 5G, but that was harder to recharge. And there was nothing reliable. And even though I had the Ethernet before, you guys can see that the quality is much better. The signal is much stronger. And even the Starlink thing is going to go out with the electricity. This is the only thing I know of that gives you 13 hours without electricity of communication. And that becomes right next in line with food and water is being able to communicate and keep your batteries charged and keep your connections available for safety,
So
for help.
does Michael have one to show us on the while we're
You have
watching?
yours handy, Michael? I can grab mine if I don't. He can probably tell you more about how they work. They were actually created by the chief of the Onondaga tribe,
Wow.
and they were created for the reservations that are remote and don't have as much electrical access and internet access. It's a beautiful device. It's very, very simple. You just charge it and you get 13 hours out of a charge. You put it, I walk over by the door and the chief himself tweaked mine to find the closest satellite. The more you have together, it comes into something by being closer to other pods and makes the signal stronger. It's very much based on native principles, and Pamela put the link to it. You can't tell by the link, though. I couldn't tell what it was. I can run 9 devices on this one little pod that's $200, and then I can choose whether I want enough data for $28 a month or $48 a month or $85 a month if I really want to rip through something, at a fast speed. It's all there, and you don't have a contract. You don't have to set one. You go in each month and you buy what you need. You plan on what you're going to do that month and the data that you need, and you pay for the thing one time, and then you do your monthly $28 or $48 or $85, and you have security. You have a peace of mind that you
Fantastic.
didn't have.
And
Yeah.
what you were saying about peace of mind, when you said, what do you do in that time when you're in this critical time? And you mentioned about your practice of Zen. And I thought, isn't it wonderful when you look at the word woman and you look at the letters and jiggle them around, you've got am now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are. We are jiggling around our womanness, our creativity, our resilience, our birthing natures of bringing spirits from the other side onto this side, life. We're the only ones who can do this on that level, and we need the help and protection of the masculine. We need, again, to create that balance.